shot from Curry with 0.6 of a second remaining. The brilliant shooting of Stephen Curry continues.
Back to Green, into the hands of Spurlock. Fast break down to Weber. He turns. Look up behind the back. And the step and the foul. What a play by Weber.
I've never seen a shooting display like this. Never.
37 and a quarter.
Swing that misses. Curry splits the defense behind the back. Fires a three. Oh, he puts it in. Spectacular move.
That could be the greatest move I've ever seen.
Here's Curry for the record.
It's good. There it is. Stephen Curry, the all-time three-point king in the NBA.
Fuck it. We'll do it live.
You're in. Or is huddle with me, Bram, and with me per usual, my master of all things video and sound, Maxime.
How's it going?
Maxime, excited to announce special episode rejoining us after way too long, a former professional basketball player in Brazil and Australia, a coaching presence in both the legendary Oakland Soldier AAU team and Bishop O'Dowd's title-winning program, the founder, owner, and operator of Triple Threat Academy, where he's developed more players than I can name into this microphone, and a guy who truly understands that Saved by the Bell was an actual masterpiece. Mr. Tony Freccero. What's going on, Tony?
Oh, that's great. That's great. Did I tell you that I had a 40th birthday party, Saved by the Bell themed?
No. Did I tell you that you and I should be best fucking friends? And why was I not invited to that 40-year-old birthday party?
Well, it was at the Laurel Lounge, and it was Saved by the Bell theme. I dressed up as Slater, both I don't know if you remember the episode where he wore the full unitard and did the ballet around. So yeah, I had a couple of costume changes. I'll have to send you some pictures. It's pretty good.
I had a complicated relationship with Slater because I had a huge crush on Lisa through most of my adolescent life and was kind of angry at their like on-screen romance. Always bothered me. Also, I mean, as long as I'm admitting weird, embarrassing things about Saved by the Bell, spent a long time wanting to be Zach Morris, down to like having that giant cell phone and his seemingly magical power to be able to stop time, something that was never really discussed. You know, like we didn't really get into why he was able to stop everyone from moving, but great show. And I'll have you know, I live in the Laurel. So, I mean, I'm not feeling really good about this party I was like 3 blocks away from and 100% not invited.
Well, you can come to the 50th.
I appreciate it. I'll come dressed as Lisa. Tony, we've got an award show coming up here, one I'm actually really excited for. But before we do, so I was going to do the background research or maybe even shoot you a text, but I figured it'd be more fun just to do it live. I meant what I said. You have had your hand in the development of multiple professional college guys. Give us a sense, man. You know, just the players that come off the top of your head. Who have you worked with over your career? Did you guys?
No, we got you.
Tony, did you hear that question?
No, it's kind of freezing on my end.
Oh,
I thought you were just icing me out. Is any better now?
No. Okay, you're back.
Boom.
Looks like I need to pay my internet bill.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
It was a Saved by the Bell gods being angry. The question was, give us a list, man. What players come to mind? Who have you worked with? And it doesn't have to be like this is the best player. Just the people who spring to the top of your mind when I ask you that.
Yeah, so we're just part of the development of lots of different kids around. Some notable people: Leon Poe, Zach Ertz, the football player, Ivan Rabb. Kimberly Veal, who is now the VP of marketing for the Valkyries, the new expansion team for the WNBA. Johnny Bryant, assistant coach for the Cavs. Damian Lillard. David West and Zaza Pachulia's kids used to be on our teams. So yeah, we've got to work with tons of kids, Some, make it a little bit further, but a lot of them have made careers in basketball. I mean, I could list off tons of college coaches, people who are involved, but yeah, those are kind of the ones that stick out. And then you mentioned we're going to talk about role players today. Probably one of the most prominent role players in Bay Area history, Juan Toscano Anderson.
Let's go, JTA. And then here's why I'm asking you to set that up, man. I'm going to throw you a couple of softballs about the Warriors too. But one of the things I enjoy about our off-mic conversations, and then always love when we're on mic, is that I learn. That we have all come to terms with speaking intelligently about basketball, even though we're not in the basketball business. I do that on a weekly basis into this microphone. But when you and I speak, I get to steal little things that I can use in other conversations that make me seem far more intelligent, which is what I'm in the market for. So today we're going to do both things before I go into the awards section that's going to let us really explore that shit. Off season, how you feeling as a Warrior fan? So not as a basketball expert now, as a big time Warrior fan, heading into this season, optimistic, like the off season. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be horrible, but I think there's 3 or 4 things that have to click for us to really compete. And if those things click, then I think we're going to be a pretty good team. If a 4, 5, 6 seed, if all those things happen. I don't think it's all doom and gloom like a lot of folks on Twitter make it out to be. But again, in my opinion, several things need to happen to make that goal at the end of the year.
You took me through a roller coaster of emotions there. Maxime, how'd you feel when he said, I don't think we're going to be horrible? Because I feel like that's kind of saying we might be horrible. And then, then he ramped it back up.
Well, to be fair, I think we've had so much dominance and winning recently that I think the Warriors fan base is like, well, anything less than a championship at this point is considered horrible. So I see where you're coming from, Tony.
What are the things, Tony? What needs to happen in order for us to not be horrible?
Yes, I think the first thing is Steph and Draymond, because they're the leaders, are going to have to stay healthy, play the majority of the season, or be available. Sometimes Draymond is healthy and not available. I think Kuminga needs to play 35 minutes a game. I think Moses Moody needs to play 25 plus minutes a game. I think Andrew Wiggins needs to get back to the 18 points a game lockdown defender. And if all the role players who they've acquired kind of fit in seamlessly, I think they have a really good team. But a lot of it, for me, hinges on Steve Kerr's trust for Moody and Kuminga, not only taking a jump, but contributing in winning ways, which I don't think he's had that trust yet.
Makes sense. And I actually should have thrown you this softball, and I'm surprised I haven't texted you this. Pods, what's your opinion? I don't know if there's ever been a player who's been successful who has gotten more angst out of Warriors fans. I haven't had a conversation with a Warrior fan yet about Podziemski where their opinion isn't hyperbolic. Either I believe him, I agree with Lacob, he's going to be great, or why won't we include him in a trade? I don't actually believe in his future the way the organization does. When you look at Brandon, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think a couple things can be true. One, I think some of these trade scenarios that are floated aren't really viable things that are happening. I don't think the Jazz were ever going to give up Laurie. I think it was all just, let's throw it out there, see what we can get. But I don't see how you could hate Pods. I mean, the guy goes out there, he balls, he dives on the floor, he takes charge, he does all those things that as a coach you love as a player. Now, I don't see him as a franchise player in terms of like, hey, he's going to be the main guy, but I hope he proves me wrong, but I think he's a tremendous connector, a glue guy that elevates any team. And the older he gets, the better he gets. Again, I don't know if he's a superstar, but man, the kid can flat out play.
Props to him. Random,
and people knock him for being cocky. I mean, that's the reason why we're going to love him, is that edge that he plays with. He doesn't give a fuck.
100% agree. I also now consider him a friend of the show. I mean, his dad's been on here more than once, and we really respect and like him. But also randomly, since the last time we recorded, went to a Giants game with the family, and we saw Podziemski at the game, and my daughter got his autograph. And there's a whole kind of side story that I'll save for another episode. Yeah, but I will leave it that Pajemski was remarkably kind to my kid, who had to like duck an usher and like jump over a aisle to get over there. So it was, a slightly shady scenario, and he rewarded her, which meant the world to me. But so that
Can
intel.
you read his autograph?
You know what? It's
read
hella
it? You know
fancy.
it's-
I wish,
it's
yeah,
him?
I wish I had it. You can't actually, if I showed you the scribble, you wouldn't know immediately whose autograph it was, but you'd think like, oh, that person's practiced their signature. Like it's a very
okay.
like tight signature. It like involves the number in there. So it was kind of fancy. I ended up leaving impressed. But today, Tony, is an award show. It's an all-time award show. I got some categories for you where we're going to look back into Warriors history and pull these guys out. But we're doing two things here. So thing number one, transparency. Content. I can tell you that coming up with a weekly NBA show during the offseason is not always the easiest thing to do. But the go-to move is you can always dust off the old all-time award. So you're helping us come up with some content. But more importantly, you're weaponizing that thing I said earlier. You're going to help us learn. So we got categories here, things like best passer, things like best shit talker, that kind of stuff. But every time we have that conversation in bars and in podcasts, we never set up what it means. What should we be looking for? What goes into that title? And I've got somebody who teaches basketball and knows it. So it seems like a good way to, venture in and expand our knowledge. And we'll start with an easy one. Okay. Easy because we already know the answer, and it'll help you dust off the coach speak and explain to us why. So the category, best shooter of all time on the Golden State Warriors. I think we all know who the winner is. So tell us what we should be looking for, man. When you're evaluating, that question, the best shooter of all time, what goes into it?
Well, I think in Steph's case, if that's the player you're referring to, you have to look at what he does off the ball, which makes him so much more of a dangerous player than, say, Kyle Korver, who sits in the corner and can shoot the lights out, but he doesn't have the gravity where all five guys are chasing around the court. So I think what makes Steph so unique is he can shoot off the dribble. He can, his step back. I think some stat came out, he shoots at like 65%. But really it's his off-ball movement that not only opens up things for other people, but opens up things for himself. As soon as the defender forgets about him or relaxes for a second, Steph just punishes you. And a lot of shooters don't do that. Reggie Miller was great at that. And I think, Steph has watched a lot of film on guys like that and said, hey, at my size and my stature, I have to constantly stay moving. So not only is it that he can shoot from 50 feet and guys are scared the second he crosses half court, but if you watch, the eyes are always on him. And it's not always like that with great shooters.
Expand it. So I love that. Okay. Expand it to just any shooter. So I'm having a conversation in a bar, and we're talking about like the greatest shooters of all time. That conversation comes up. Give me some bullet points I could throw in there before I say Steph. So I'm going to use what you just told me. He moves, he can shoot from 50, he can hit all the shots. But just generally speaking, like if you're scouting a shooter, what are you looking for? Is it like release time? Is it ability to shoot from any location? What are the bona fides that go into being a great shooter just generally?
Yeah, I think the two main things that I would look for is one, what type of shooter are they? So are they catch and shoot, which means, I'm waiting for someone else to create for me? Or am I someone that can both, catch and shoot and create a shot for myself? And I think, a lot of these guys who are really good shooters don't necessarily create for themselves. So there's different types. If you have a Luka on your team, Luka Doncic, you don't necessarily need a bunch of shooters that create for themselves because he creates for you. If you don't have someone like that, then it's really hard for some guys to create their own shots. So they're more like, I'm going to wait, catch and shoot. Can I create space? So that's one thing I would look for. And then the second thing is just confidence. That I missed 10 in a row. I'm shooting the next 10 just like I shot the first 10. That's the definition of a shooter, is someone who forgets about the last shot and just keeps firing up. Because there's lots of kids or players you see that can shoot, but once something gets in their head, they're done.
That's me. That's 100. You
oh,
just
yeah?
described,
Okay.
yeah, 100%. You just described me. I'm that guy. If I'm playing amongst people who know I'm a good player, and I make my first couple, look out. Like I can heat up. I'm also that guy. If I go in and nobody knows me, and I miss my first two, I shrink, and I fucking hate it. And I know that about. I have unfortunately been that dude through most of my non-distinct basketball career. To our next category, and when I'm kind of excited.
Do you shrink because you're afraid the other guys are going to judge you for shooting and missing?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And to be fair, I mean, taking humor out of it takes more than two. I'll probably, if I get to like 1 for 5, then yeah. I'm becoming.
You're done shooting for the day.
Probably. Yeah. Until like towards the end, I can remember a championship intramural game where I missed my first 4. And was deep in my head. They needed my offense. We lost that game pretty badly. And then in the fourth quarter, when we were already down 10 and there's no time left, I started firing up threes and hitting them and shit. And it's because it no longer mattered. It was what it was. It was what it was. But I didn't bring you on here so that I could read you my basketball diary. Let's go to our next topic. All right. But all of us can fire off what goes into this award. So let's crown them. I'm assuming we all pick Steph as the best shooter of all time for the Golden State Warriors. Okay. Next category, a little bit more amorphous. Best shit talker of all time on the Warriors. Okay. Don't give me your answers yet, boys. What goes into this? Yeah. What makes an in particularly effective shit talker? Maxime, we haven't heard from you. What do you think, man? If someone was going to shithouse you, what would make them, effective? Like, what would you look into as far as evaluating talking on the floor?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think I've always wanted to. I've sat pretty close to the court for a Warriors game just once in my life. I mean, in this modern era, I used to sneak down when it was back in Oracle and the tickets were like $10. But that's sort of a different thing. I wasn't really paying attention. I was just there to have a good time. But like wanting to actually hear what's going on, I've only been down there once. And I think what matters to me the most, what I remember is back when I was at Cal, going to basketball games. Rallycom would hand out cards with all of the players on the opposing team and like facts about them, right? And so like we would know like really heinous shit about like somebody's mom was sick, and so people would be like yelling out about like, hey, like, is your mom okay, when people were taking shots, like really gnarly stuff. And I think that is the thing that really would get under my skin, is not just because it's personal, but because that would mean that somebody's been paying attention and knows something about me, and then I feel very self-conscious. So I think it's the self-conscious angle that really kind of makes it matter the most.
It's like haunting you. It turns out if you want to shithouse me, you have to do nothing. Just let me shoot and I'll get very self-conscious. Tony, what goes into being a good shit talker? What would you look at here?
I think a couple things. One, being so witty and fast that the person that you're talking shit to can't come back. They just kind of are at a loss for words. And two, the ability, like Maxime said, that little jab that you throw fucks up your mind so much that you're now out of the game a little bit, and you're rattled and you're shaken. If you can do those two things, it's not the big, like, I'm going to puff my chest and say I'm going to kick your ass. It's the little jabs, when you play against someone who's just witty and it's not even personal. Sometimes it's just, whatever, it can really get under your skin. And I think I know who the best, at least that I've seen play with the Warriors, best shit talker is. And I'm excited to see who you guys think it is.
Yeah. We'll get to the reveals in a second here. Best line anyone's ever dropped to me. Right before we started a game, didn't know anybody, pickup game. Someone from the other team pointed at me and said, "He's with us." I still don't know what that meant. It's been years, dude. It's like it sticks in my head still. Like subtle little thing that that absolutely got in there. Anyone ever say anything to you in any of the games? Did any lines stick out as like, ooh, he got me on that one?
The one time I was rattled the most, we were in high school playing at El Cerrito High School, and they had a guy named Circus King. I don't know if you remember Raymond King. He ended up playing at Cal. And he was a high school phenom. And it was, I think, the second time we played him. And the first time I did a really good job guarding him. And so there was these newspaper articles and things. And I went to the bathroom off the court right before the game. And there was 3 guys in there that kind of were in there. And they said, "Hey, we'll be waiting for you in the parking lot if you do that again." And I was spooked the entire game. But I got into the game. I played really well. But I did not leave the gym by myself. You know,
I guess
that was the one time I can really remember that it kind of shook me to the core. I was like, oh shit, you know,
immediately
just trying to pee here,
that.
guys, just trying to pee and play some basketball, you know.
We played Fremont twice when I was at Skyline. The first time we played them, they were the best team in the league at that time, and I had a good game. God, I forget their point guard, but he was their best player, and we played. He had a better game than me, but I played well enough where, like, after that game, we did the whole dap up, hug kind of thing. And then now we're at the second game. We're playing at home, and I go out there early, and it's just the two of us on the floor warming up, and there's a crowd because it was supposed to be a big game. And we're going back to the respective locker rooms to do, like, you know, whatever it is going to do because the warm-ups are over. And I reach out to dap him up again, thinking that I've earned this guy's respect. Nothing. It was just me and my extended hand. And I can remember, like, trying to pretend I was stretching my arm, like, oh, I just wanted to walk over. And the vulnerability that made me feel was awful. All right, who's the pick? The best Warrior shit talker of all time, boys. I'll start us off. So, I mean, I'm going to ramp up. It's going to be Draymond because I think that he has weaponized this. But I'll throw some other names out there and random ones. Jordan Poole, we know that he could get underneath people's skin. He got his mentor to punch him in the face. Another random one, Avery Johnson, the little general. I bet you that he was constantly talking. I don't know that. I haven't seen any stories, but I remember thinking while watching him play here that he seemed to get underneath people's skin. Jarrett Jack, for the same reason. Rick Barry is hated almost universally. I don't know if that's his personality, so instead I'll just attribute it to, you know, things he said on the floor. But all of those nominees in there, I'm going, and Stack Jack too, but I go Draymond. I don't know how we can go in the other direction. Who do you guys got?
Tim Hardaway.
Why?
Talk about someone who never stopped running his mouth. He was quick, you know, from the streets of Chicago, and he would just the whole game. I think he's a better shit talker than Draymond.
Do you remember when they did the Run TMC broadcast? It was like 2 years ago, and he had to apologize over like 8 things that he said, and none of them were like that bad. You know, they were a little outdated, and you're not allowed to say some of the things he jumped in. So that backs you, Maxime.
Well, the only other name that I would toss in is Andre Iguodala, which I feel like, again, it's the same sort of thing. Very smart, right? And I remember him lining up for somebody else's free throws over and over again, and just sort of like the side of his mouth being open, his eyes pointed in a direction, like saying offhand comments that probably, to Tony's point, completely got under somebody's skin.
Don't you think, though, there's at least a chance for some of those comments it's like a Kendrick Lamar diss track? Like, you'd have to go back and do a ton of research. And then you realize, like, oh my God, like, he destroyed me. But whatever it is that he said actually on the free throw line, you didn't really understand. You're like, oh, that's really fucking complicated, man. I'm not totally sure where you're coming from now.
Yeah, but he's playing the long game, right? You know, it's an 82 game season, 16 game playoffs, right? Like,
you go back into the locker room and mention what he said, and someone else is like, oh, he fucked you up. And now you suddenly know, the next time you see him in the on the free throw line, you're hurting. All right. Best role player, Tony. So I'm not even really sure how to define this. So I'll just say it's someone who doesn't start, right? I mean, with that out there, you tell me, what do you look at? If we're using the phrase role player, what goes into evaluating whether or not they're good?
So I think there's different levels of role players. Most players in the NBA are role players, even guys that start. You know, you got your dudes. Shout out Ricky G on Twitter. You know, he's the dude guy. Then you have your stars, and then everyone else is pretty much a role player. So what you're really looking for is a glue guy, right? Someone who is respected in the locker room, even though they may not be the best player. Someone who hustles when you run liners, that's beating everyone, even though they know they're not getting the playing time, and yelling at you if you don't. Again, guys that are diving on the floor, doing the little things that they know they're not going to get the glory for, but ultimately, hopefully translate into winning games. And they don't seek out the credit. They're just, a lot of times just happy to be on the team, and those guys that, it's like, oh, you play? It's like, yeah. And they just go out there and they give it their all. They support, they do all those things as a coach. You're like, man, if I could clone this guy, I'd have 10 of them, just give him a little more talent.
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, at the end of the day, everyone has to figure out what their role is. And as soon as these like high profile role guys figure out what their niche is, then they thrive in that role. And I think a lot of guys in the NBA don't accept that they're role players, and it's really hard for them to adapt and adjust, knowing, because all these NBA guys growing up, they were the man. They were the best player on their high school team, probably the best player on their college team. And now you get to the NBA and it's like, hey, we need you to play 12 minutes a game and go rebound. And you're like, wow, I can score, I can do other things, but that doesn't always translate to winning.
I think the perfect example of what you're saying is Devin Booker in the Olympics, right? I mean, it's a guy who's used to dominating on his team, and then he realized, well, that's not what I need here. What can I do? I heard Austin Rivers say on his pod, which I'm embarrassed at how much I enjoy, that knowing your role can save your life, and that a lot of people come in to the NBA and think that they should be occupying something else, and they find themselves out of the league. Whereas if you realize, okay, here's the thing I can definitely do, and then off you go. The other thing I liked about your answer is you opted for the fancy niche. I'm a niche guy, but I mean, I see play.
I wasn't quite sure which one it was, so I threw out
niche.
one and figured I'd get corrected.
No, not corrected. It's highbrow. That's very nicely played. All right, that's our parameters for best role player. Who's the answer? Best role player in Warriors history. And we should also note that this is most likely recency bias. I mean, we're trying to stretch back. I dropped Avery Johnson, those kind of things. I understand that Warriors history goes back decades before my attention span can bring up these names. So if we're leaving people out, our apologies, recency bias. Role player, Tony, what do you got?
For me, we're going to talk about the championship teams. I think when Durant was here, role players were less important because you had so much firepower that first year. But if you look at the 22 championship, I mean, it screams Juan Toscano Anderson, from hyping up his teammates to running over and giving them high fives to just doing all the little things, whether it was, hey, you're going to start today, you're not going to play today. His attitude never changed. He, for me, is the definition of what you want a role player to be on a winning team.
I like that. So I was going to give you Andre Iguodala just because it's the easiest one. Guy who came off the bench, sacrificed, right? But if we're really going into someone who used the amount of talent they had to have a much larger impact, because Andre just shifted his impact. It wasn't that he wasn't no longer playing, starters minutes. He just wasn't starting. So if it's somebody who wasn't incredibly talented, but really left their impact on a good team, Kent Bazemore. Same kind of idea. He was all the way in there. He even when he wasn't playing, he was making his impact with ridiculous celebrations on the bench and everything else. Another name from the past, if we're gonna stretch back, Rony Turioff, who was the best towel waving player I've ever seen in my life. I genuinely believe he spent 8 minutes a night just waving towels in different ways to figure out the best wrist movements and how he could really get a crowd fired up. So hey, you've shifted my answer, Maxime. What do you got?
Well, to me, I think, and maybe this kind of pushes Tony's definition a little bit off to the side because I feel like he played more than this would allow. But Sean Livingston, to me, was the definition. And especially now that it's almost like in his absence, we see how valuable he was because when we needed that midi, he could just hit it reliably. He wasn't the dude that was the center of playmaking, but he could play make if he needed to. But I think to me, that's kind of an obvious answer that jumped to my mind right away. So I kind of want to throw you guys a curveball just because it's fun. Why not? I think it technically counts even though he's the coach. When he was a player, Steve Kerr was the epitome of a role player, and not just on the Bulls, right? In 03, there's another famous Game 6 moment when dude barely played at all and then got put in right at the end and drained it in the Western Conference Finals rather to get the Spurs to the finals to ultimately win the game. So and that's also, I think, part of what makes Kerr such a compelling and unique coach is that he can clearly coach the stars because, right, everybody knows that he was on the same team and got punched by Michael Jordan, but also that he understands the role player and how to give that strength and numbers thing because he was a role player at one point.
I'm in a complicated place in my relationship with Sean Livingston. I recently, to try to kind of tweet this podcast out and to drum up interest, I tweeted out who's the best Warriors post player of all time, and then answered my own question, thinking I was being really clever with Sean Livingston because he was money within 10 feet, and within, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds, everybody poured in to be like, "You're an asshole. Wilt Chamberlain is one of the greatest post players of all time. How would you not know that?" And I've been like, I retweeted, I like deleted the tweet. It's been a really ugly time for Sean Livingston things for me. So it's unfortunate that his name got mentioned here. Tony, best name to here. Actually, let me start it up this way. I was on a ride recently, a bike ride. We ran into some strangers. They noticed I was wearing a Warriors shirt. And we had kind of a condescending question or a conversation back and forth. I won't go into its details, but I was ready to try to prove to these people that I had been a Warrior fan for a really long time. The opportunity didn't come. With the conversation didn't progress to like the "fuck you, I've been here forever," but it felt like it that it might. So that led to this question: if you wanted to prove to somebody, I've been here. We didn't start with the titles. I've been a Warriors fan for a really long time. What's the best name to drop that illustrates that?
Wow. I'm going to go with Chris Gatling.
Let's go, the Energizer Bunny. And you can make some takes about his headband, and his strangely shaped dome. I like that a lot. The one I've always used is Vonteego Cummings, and then you can throw in face mask, because people will know that. Yuri Welsh, there's another random one for you. That was Rick Barry's boy. And Corey Blunt. I always liked Blunt. That always made me happy just to say that. I remember like in the mid to late 90s, that last name made me very, very excited. Maxime, who do you drop? Do you have someone in pocket or you're like, "Oh no, I've been here forever"?
No, because I haven't. I mean, I think I'm like 10 years old. But as I've said before, I mean, Baron Davis was one of the first players that I loved in the Warriors era. So, I mean, I think that just shows my age more than anything. But then my boy Russ, knows players from well before he was even born. So, it's also just a lack of studiousness on my part.
Tony, don't tell him, but that segment.
Hey, shout out to Tom Tolbert.
Oh, there you go.
Tom Tolbert should be on that list.
Yeah, very solid, very solid. And I think Maxime already knows it now, and the whisper portion got fucked up. But this segment was for Maxime. Maxime, write some of those names down. Yeah, you could drop them. Drop them at any point, too. Just it's up to you. I'll spell Yuri Welsh for you down the line. Best handle, Tony. Actually, you know what? Let me change that. Best enforcer. We have talked about enforcer a lot of different ways, and I always put it into kind of a funny context. If you're in like zombie apocalypse, who would you want on your team? But as a basketball analysis, when we're using that phrase, enforcer, what goes into it? What would make a good enforcer on a team?
So I think it's someone that leads more with their actions than their words. It's not the loudest guy who's acting tough. It's the guy who instantly steps in and everyone says, "Okay, we're good. Check ball. We're not messing with you." Someone who has the back of the stars and their players. So when they get knocked down, they come over, push people out of the side, pick them up. Need to put someone on their ass every once in a while with a hard screen, but not necessarily a dirty player, but just a player that sets really hard screens, rebounds, and basically no one messes with. They're like, "Hey, respect. We'll take it to this certain line. Once you step in, we're going a different direction."
Award it. Who's the best enforcer in Warriors history in your mind?
Ooh. Again, probably some recency bias, but David West.
Yeah.
Is a name that sticks out because no one on the team wanted to mess with him. He was a calming presence. And I don't know if you've ever met him. I mean, just instantly you're like, "Okay, I'm not going to mess with this guy. He's a lot bigger than you think." And his demeanor just says, "Hey, don't fuck with me."
What it says is he's not a hold me back guy, which is what you're describing. There's a whole lot of people who would tell you they'd like to fight and they'd like to be held back. There's a second category of people who won't tell you anything, until it's time to fight. And then they're just fighting. There's no words. They're just actually throwing. Have you ever played with anybody who was a good enforcer or someone who tended to fight a ass ton?
Well, I think that those are two questions, right? I definitely
the
have
last
played
one.
with guys
Take
that
the last
just
one. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I want
they
the-
might throw the first punch and then wait for the enforcer to really step in. But yeah, actually, one of my best friends, a guy named Chris Talbot, he works for a sports agency down in LA. He was that guy who was just a pest that you just hated to play against, but you love being on your team. But if anything went down, he was the first one to hit someone in the nuts or do something to say, hey, get out of here. And he wasn't afraid to scrap. Played with him at Cal State Hayward. But yeah, no, there's a big difference between the loud guy and the enforcer. And that's something you'll realize the more you play.
There's a guy I played with in high school who I'm still so afraid of. I'm not going to say his name. Even like on the off chance that the beep doesn't work, I'm just going to keep it in bucket. And I can tell you there was more than one on a weekly basis where I was afraid he was going to beat the shit out of me in practice. And then I was not confrontational at all. Interesting dude, and led to not a small amount of fights. Maxime, who is you? Do you adopt David West too? Does someone else stick out?
No, David West is, I think, the obvious answer. Not because he's also the type of person who's like really intelligent, so you kind of you don't expect him to say a lot, but he's going to back it up. But also, I think it doesn't really count because then that's caused him to leave the team. But Sprewell is the definition of action speaking louder than words, right? I wouldn't want to be getting in a fight with him on the court after the Carlissimo incident.
Yeah, Spree. I mean, we've said this so many times, but the thing that stuck out to me about that Spree story was that the choking didn't happen immediately after whatever the inciting event was. You know, there's arguments about what was said, and so we won't go into that. But theoretically, supposedly, Spree, something was said to him. He gets super angry. He goes to the shower, spend however long it takes to take a shower. You know, I mean, even a fast shower, you're talking 5-10 minutes. And then after those 5 to 10 minutes, he was still like, no, fuck that. And had to go up there and choke him, which is an impressive amount of motivational anger. You know, it really takes a lot to hold on to it for that long. Our final question, and it's a random one. Tony, you now have the magical ability to pick anybody from Warriors, past, present, I guess not future because we don't know if they'll be here. So just past or present, you can take them out to dinner. You get to spend an evening with them, and it's another component to this magical ability is that they will be happy to talk to you about anything. You can ask them about any experience they've had, any conversation you want. It's all off the record, but out it'll spill. Who would you like to spend that dinner with?
Well, from a purely curious standpoint, Wilt Chamberlain, just to see how he got to 20,000 or whatever his number was, because that's pretty impressive. But honestly, probably right? Jordan Poole. I think Jordan Poole would be fascinating to sit down with if you could get him to talk and open up just about how he started in the NBA, how he rose so quickly, and how all this stuff went down. Being a younger guy on a veteran team, I'd like to sit down with him for an hour and a half, have some beers, and just hear him tell stories. I think it'd be fascinating.
I didn't prep you for this, so if you want to think on it while I give my answer, you're free to. But if you had one question for Jordan Poole, if you had to answer one question from you, what would it be? You want a couple seconds while I give you I'll vamp for you, and then you can give us a question, or do you have something in mind?
Sure.
Already? All right.
No, go ahead.
Coaches for me, and I've done this a couple of times. So there's a lot of people out there. I think Gilbert Arenas would be fun. I think Draymond, if he was just totally honest and open, I think that conversation would be fascinating. But for me, it's probably Steve Kerr still. And it's because of the full spectrum of shit so we could spend a full night on just 2015. We could spend nights on discussing how quickly he knew Kevin Durant was out. I'd like to know his approach on Draymond. I'd like to know, secretly, how does Steph get ready for games? But you know what era I'd like to talk the most to Steve Kerr about? Not Jordan, not Popovich, not the current Warriors. I want to hear about the Jailblazers. I want to hear what the hell was going on with that Portland team, what kind of crazy shit was going on in the hotels, what was going on the bus. I'd like to spend a full dinner of all right, Jailblazers, dude, what the fuck happened? And I think it would be a fascinating evening.
Agree. Yeah, you're right. That's who we should all sit down with.
Question for Poole. Who do you got? Or do you want to, should we go to Maxime and give you a little bit more time?
No, it's okay. I got it. I would ask him, hey, after getting punched, was there anything that could happen that would have wanted you to stay on the Warriors and be fully invested in the team?
I like it. Maxime, you had one question for Poole. I mean, what a kind of a fun deal here. I mean, it would be the easy one for me is, what did you say? What prompted the punch? That's an unfair thing to say. Describe for me the 90 seconds before your mentor punched you in the face. I'd like to know exactly what went down during those 90 seconds.
Man, yeah. Oh man. What I would want to know is, did he feel like he had any support within that locker room before and after, right? There was other stuff that was coming up. There's other stuff that came up recently again on Reddit that was showing that, Draymond was getting in his face and on some bench timeout earlier in the season. And I just hope he wasn't lonely. He's talking about it just seems like a hard life to be a young guy,
100% he was lonely in that locker room after he got punched in the face. Can you imagine how awkward that would be? Like, if you're in there, if you're one of the other people, you're not Draymond, you're not Jordan Poole, this has just happened, and now you're getting dressed in that locker room. Like, do you know how deep my face would be in my phone trying not to make eye contact with anybody because I'm not sure what we're supposed to be doing, But who's your guy?
But I think he went out and finished his workout.
Did he?
Went back on the court. Yeah.
There you go.
No.
Yeah. Well, at some point still, they had to go into that very awkward locker room setting. I don't care what he did immediately after the punch. I'm sure it was a little bit hard.
Let me ask you this. Would it be more awkward for him, or you're next to Draymond in his locker and you're like, hey, man,
there's not an inch
what the fuck was that,
room. There's not an inch in that locker room that I'm feeling comfortable. Not one. I mean, that's exactly what I mean. Yeah. It'd be much easier if there's like, oh, okay, I can go over here and we all know he was out of pocket. Like, no, there would not be. There's nowhere in there I'd feel okay to be. Dinner question. Maxime, who do you want to have dinner with?
Oh, the answer is obvious. You guys know me. Yuri Welsh, of course.
You have been rooting for this team for a really long time, Maxime. Wow, I'm really impressed. Here, I have a question for you there. If I had to ask Yuri Welsh a conversational topic, I'd ask him, is Rick Barry an actual asshole? Because Rick Barry has been trying to get into a coaching staff for as long as I can remember. He was very interested in it for a very long time. He's also developed the one apparently foolproof method to shoot free throws accurately. And the only player I know who worked with him for a consistently long period of time was Yuri Welsh. Like, nobody else was down. So, and maybe we're far enough out where Yuri could actually describe whether or not Rick Barry was an asshole. If it wasn't Yuri Welsh, who would it be, Maxime?
Now the question is a lot harder, Actually kidding. The first person that came to mind is Mully. Because you could get all eras. I could finally actually get a lesson from somebody that isn't just being an asshole to me, but is also still in the modern game, right? Is still with the Warriors specifically a part of the broadcast. Clearly knows everybody from all eras. I think that'd be fascinating. But then I think overarching, it's a little bit more of a tangent. But Jerry West, right? Literally the logo. There's just so many histories. Why did he leave? What was going on with ownership there? What is he seeing? Obviously, everybody just a beloved figure in the NBA, but just such a wealth of knowledge from all aspects, all angles of the game.
I like this new game. Mully, my question for him: how close did they get to trading for Kevin Garnett? Because when he was our GM, supposedly they were right there. And it ultimately didn't go down. And then Jerry West, I'd like to know if there's any truth to that rumor that when he was here in Golden State for the first couple of years, they had to assign someone to watch the games with him because he'd get so frustrated with both play and the officiating that he'd want to go down and talk to the people on the court. And they needed someone to be like, no, it's good, Jerry. No, we'll talk to him afterwards for sure, but we're going to need you up here. I hope that's true. I loved his passion. You got a question for Mully or West, Tony?
I'd have to think about that. I've been around Mully multiple times. Great guy, very open. I'd probably ask him about growing up in New York in the 80s and how he was just a legend, a white guy who just shoots the shit out of the ball with enough neck hair to make you squirm, and I'd probably ask him about his earlier days.
After I asked him about Kevin Garnett, I'd ask him a more personal one. And I would ask that when Bonte introduced me to him, could he tell how awkward I felt? And did it get really uncomfortable for him? Or was that just me? Has he remembered it? There'd be a lot of follow-ups there. I don't think he'd remember, but it was a difficult thing for me. Tony, missed you, man. Appreciate you joining us today.
I missed you guys too.
Yeah, you dropped a bunch of gems. I know I won't be the only one using them. Everyone out there now has ways to kind of discuss these things the next time they find themselves in a bar conversation. For people who need far more Tony Freccero in their life, where do they go?
Well, if you have kids that want to play basketball, ttahoops.com, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm not sure what my name is. I think it's Triple Tony F is my handle. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
I will drop a plug for that as well. My kid went to Triple Threat Academy, and it was a phenomenal entry point for her. She's now playing hoop and really enjoys it. For us, we're on social media everywhere. Just search out Warriors Huddle. We also have a YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Warriors Huddle. You'll find us there. And then you can also shoot us an email. Let us know we did a good job, bad job, any job. You can shoot that too.
Huddle@warriorshuddle.com.
We're thinking about changing that to yuriwelsh.com. But until that change is made, that's where you can hit us. With that in mind, go Warriors. Hopefully, see you real soon.
Go